I'm from Naturally Fueled, and today I'm just going to be talking a little bit about how to stay positive with type 1 diabetes. So I noticed recently that a lot of people struggle with the whole mental side of having type 1 diabetes, which is so fair enough because it's a pain and it's confusing and it's stressful, and I get that. So I'm just going to be sharing a few tips that I have that allow me to maintain a positive outlook on the whole thing. So I'm just going to jump straight into them with my first tip, which is to be inspired by others, which is a little bit cringy, but just look at Theresa May, for example. All Brexit things aside, she is basically running the United Kingdom with type 1 diabetes. That's something. And I remember when I was 11 years old and I was first diagnosed, I didn't know what any of it meant. And the nurses were trying to explain to me how I could live this normal life, but I'd need an injection at every meal time. I need another injection before I go to bed. I could go into a coma if I took too much insulin. And I was just sitting there thinking, how on earth could I possibly live a normal life like this? And then it was actually a student doctor who asked me if I knew the Jonas Brothers. And obviously my 11-year-old self knew them very well. And she told me that Nick Jonas had diabetes, type 1 diabetes. And I remember just sitting there thinking, why didn't they start with that? Because I just remember thinking, it's so fine now. Like, if he can live such a fast-paced life with type 1 diabetes, then I can do whatever. Phil Graham is a great example of, if you're interested in bodybuilding, there's so many athletes out there, and it really is possible to do anything. And it's great to just look for others for that inspiration. So that's my first tip. So my second tip is to follow the hashtag type 1 diabetes on Instagram. I think it's a really light-hearted way of reminding yourself that you're not alone. There's so many people out there that are struggling the same struggles that you are on a daily basis. Like, I find it really comforting when I wake up and for some reason my sugars are high and I don't know why, and I'm about to get frustrated, and then I see that someone else has like posted a picture of the exact same thing on Instagram, being like, don't know why, and it just reminds you that it's not your fault. It happens to everyone, and it can be a bit lonely in a way if you don't know anybody else that has type 1 diabetes, because it can be a difficult thing to understand. Like, for example, when you're eating Skittles to stop yourself collapsing and one of your friends asks you for one, and it's just so frustrating, but there's nothing you can do about it. So I definitely recommend following the hashtag type 1 diabetes on Instagram, or even joining some Facebook groups, just to remind yourself that there are other people that are dealing with the same things every day. So my next tip is to be grateful of all the knowledge that it's given you. For example, be grateful that you're not one of those people that take pictures of a big fatty chocolatey cake and then hashtag diabetes, because you know that's not how it works. Or be grateful that you're not one of those people that give you a second look when you're taking insulin thinking that it's God knows what, because you're more informed than that. And I know that ever since I was diagnosed with diabetes, like, I now know so much about my body that I would never know. I know what's actually good for it and what's actually not. I know how it works. You get your own personal insight into how your body works. And I find that personally very interesting. So that's definitely a pro of having type 1 diabetes. The next thing that helps me to stay positive about having type 1 diabetes is definitely to learn not to overanalyze things. Last year, I had a little notepad and I took down each and every reading that I took, how many grams of carbs I was eating, how many steps I walked, which is great. It's great to keep a record of things and to keep track of how you're going, but I became a little bit obsessed with it, and I was looking at it from a day-to-day basis and thinking, why did it go up here when it didn't go up there yesterday, and I took the same amount of insulin and I ate the same amount of carbs. I was really getting worked up if things weren't perfect every single day. Like, I was stopping myself from going out for drinks with my friends because I was afraid that it would mess it up the next day, or going out for lunch because I'd be afraid of, like, if I wouldn't take enough insulin or anything like that. It becomes almost obsessive, and it's unhealthy. And I think it's best just to keep it at a balance, to understand that it's not your fault when it goes high, Sometimes these things just happen and they don't always have an explanation for them. Like, there are, I think it's 42 things that can affect your blood sugar. So you're never going to know which one of them is the reason that it's high or is the reason that it's gone low. So I definitely think probably the most important one is not to overanalyze and not to beat yourself up about it. Just understand, like, oh, it's high. Okay, take a bit of insulin, correct it, make it go back low again. That's what insulin's for. You shouldn't punish yourself if it's ever high, and I think that's a really important thing to remember. And lastly is just to remember that it's really not the worst thing in the world. If you can go for a walk and you can see and you can move, and you have so much to be grateful for. If you have no complications with your type 1 diabetes and you're looking after it, then you've really nothing to worry about. And I think it's just so important to be grateful for what you have as well. And just to remember that it's not the worst thing in the world. And if you take your insulin and you check your blood sugars, you'll be fine. So that's my few little tips on how to stay positive with type 1 diabetes. If you have any more, just let me know. And if you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe. Thank you.